Welcome back, dear viewers, and now we continue our coverage for the parliamentary elections and the expected results that will be announced tomorrow at the press conference at 2 p.m. as President Fattah al-Sisi said that he was informed of events that took place in some electoral constituencies where individual parliamentary seats are contested. And now we are joined over the phone by Dr. Moataz Abu Zeid, Professor of Law. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So, Dr. Moataz, how do you view President Fattah al-Sisi's stance towards and his statement early in the day regarding the events that took place in some electoral constituencies?
Yes, of course, the statement produced or the announcement issued by Mr. President Fattah al-Sisi carries two main indications. The first one, that there is a very keen and very strict follow-up from the presidency of the Republic to control or to supervise the electoral process during the last days until the announcement of the results of the first stage of the parliamentary elections for House of Representatives. And the second indication carries that the president himself is keen to give any statements or give any comments about any violations or any mistakes that can be happened during this electoral process, and of course this will be faced by procedures or effective procedures by the High Committee of Electoral Supervision.
So, sir, also the President said in his statement, called on the NEA to prioritize transparency of the measures through reassuring that the delegate of each candidate obtains a copy of the list of the voters from sub-voting committees. So, how do you read this statement?
Yes, of course, this is a very right procedure to ensure the fairness of this electoral process. Of course, to reach the promotion of the Parliament by its two chambers, House of Representatives and Senate, it needs a very sensitive electoral process, and of course to be sure that every electoral step was performed in a right way. And of course, as long as the election is a very important constitutional merit and a very important democratic procedure that will give us the complete formation of the legislative power, of course these points must be considered during the electoral process according to the list of the nominees, the list of the electoral people that have the right to elect, the rights of nominees and candidates, and of course the rights of their delegates in the committee to complete these elections in the right way.
And did you follow the press conference by the National Elections Authority as Chief Judge Hazem bin Badawi said the vote irregularities made in any polling stations during the first phase of the House of Representatives elections earlier this month will be investigated thoroughly, and also he said that he received 88 complaints and will issue a report tomorrow about them. So how did you follow the press conference?
Of course, this press conference was very important. That firstly, it shows the high response or the speed response of the High Committee of Supervision of these elections. And of course, this is a response in a right way. Of course, this committee was formed firstly according to many members of judicial powers, and that was intended as long as any violations or any mistakes can happen like this will be investigated, will be treated in a very constitutional and legal way, and of course announcement of the President of the High Supervision Committee of the elections is very effective and comes in its right time before the announcement of the result of these elections. And of course, the High Committee of Electoral Supervision has all the powers and all the incentives that supported it to have any procedure to assure the right procedures of these elections.
Also, the president said that the National Election Authority should not be hesitant to make the right decision when the true will of the voters cannot be achieved, even if this means totally or partially cancelling this phase of the election in one or more constituencies. So how do you read this statement by the president?
Yes, of course, no doubt that this announcement of Mr. President Fattah al-Sisi shows how much this electoral process is very related to the principles of human rights in Egypt. And of course, the procedures and the practice of political human rights figure in the electoral process, especially for the House of Representatives, as it is an effective parliament council for supervising the government, issuing laws. So it must be performing in a right way. And of course, cancelling this electoral process or giving a certain announcement for some committees to repeat its electoral process, of course, this is a very great guarantee for the rightness of this electoral process if there is any mistakes or violations or complaints come from the voters, which indicates that we are keen to reflect the right votes or the right opinion of people during this electoral process.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Moataz Abu Zeid, the Professor of Law. Thank you, sir, for being with us. Thank you, sir. And as we said earlier, that President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi talked about the parliamentary elections, and he said that he was informed of events that took place in some electoral constituencies where individual parliamentary seats are contested. And in a statement on his social media account, he said that such events are being investigated solely by National Election Authority, which he said is an independent body according to the law. He called on the NEA to be very accurate with its investigations and verifications of the events and appeals, and to take decisions that satisfy God and honestly reflect the true will of the voters. He called on the NEA to prioritize transparency of the measures through reassuring that the delegate of each candidate obtains a copy of the list of voters from sub-voting committees. He said this would guarantee that MPs would be true representatives of the people. He said the NEA should not be hesitant to make the right decision when the true will of the voters cannot be achieved, even if it means totally or partially cancelling this phase of the elections in one or more constituencies. He said in this case, the election can be reheld later in these constituencies. He called on the NEA to reveal the outcome of investigations and measures taken with regard to electoral campaigning violations to achieve effective monitoring of the election process, and so it does not breach its legal frame nor be repeated in the coming phases. He concluded the statement saying, "Long live Egypt." And the National Elections Authority also the National Elections Authority said vote irregularities made in any polling stations during the first phase of the House of Representatives elections earlier this month will be investigated thoroughly.